Hello, you're listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. That was It's Already Over by Brooke Royal. Coming up next, Congregation by Foo Fighters. And please, stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, because at noon, we will have the news, the weather, and then, shortly after that, GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. So please stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave and enjoy the music. Thank you very much for listening. Currently, it is 77 degrees here on the campus of Florissant Valley Community College. I'm Jell with your noon news update. In local news, roads closed by mudslide and may not reopen for months. Part of a Jefferson County road that was closed due to a mudslide may not reopen for months. Part of Route M between I-55 and Highway 67 in the Barnhart area was closed following a mudslide in April. MoDOT officials say a hillside by the road is unstable. This is expected to make the repairs difficult and dangerous. Because of this, the road may not reopen until September. Train hits vehicle in Jefferson County. Surprisingly, no one was hurt after an Amtrak train collided with a vehicle in Jefferson County. The crash happened yesterday near Sulphur Springs Landing. The train was carrying over 150 passengers, but no one was injured. I think Amtrak's having some issues. Okay, earthquake near Bonne Terre. The U.S. Geological Survey says an earthquake shook southeast Missouri. It happened yesterday morning near Bonne Terre. It registered a 2.6 magnitude. No injuries were reported. National news! A Senate panel is taking a close look at federal surveillance and wiretapping authority. A hearing on the matter is now underway. It features some top U.S. intelligence and law enforcement officials, including Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates. Coates said there have been no intentional violations of wiretap and surveillance authority since the federal program was authorized about 10 years ago. A Senate panel is also taking a close look at... Why did that copy twice? Okay. Let me give me just a second. Terribly sorry. It should have brought... Oh, geez, that's not there. Okay, moving right along. The death toll is at least 12 following a pair of attacks today in Iran's capital. State media reports say gunmen dressed as women stormed the parliament building in Tehran and opened fire. They also took hostages and detonated at least one suicide bomb. Yeah. In campus news, Campus Life hosts an ice cream social on June 22nd from noon to 1:30 in the multipurpose room. So that's a thing. And also, one-act plays are starting here on campus today, June 7th, through June 11th in the theater. So you might want to head on down and look at that. And now... it is time for the weather. Well, we're not having technical difficulties. It will be time for the weather. I'm terribly sorry for these hiccups. You know, sometimes you try to bring up the weather and then your entire system decides to freeze up and thinks, hey, that's a good idea. I'm a system. I'm going to freeze up right now as you're trying to give everyone their forecast. But I did look at it ahead of time, and I'm going to tell you, it's kind of weird. We got, like, some pretty high highs and some surprisingly low lows. Like, at night, we're looking at it being, like, 50, 60 degrees-ish for most of the week. But throughout the day, it's going to be 70s, 80s. And then Sunday, yeah, it's going to be, like, 95 as the high and, like, like 71 as the low. So Sunday is going to be really, really hot as soon as this... As soon as this computer decides to stop being stupid, I will tell you all about that. See, this is... But yeah, no, the weather, it's gonna be quite a thing. It's, like I said, highs are pretty high. You know what? I'm gonna let y'all get back to the music. And then when the computer decides to stop being dumb, I'll tell y'all the weather. And then we'll be able to get to GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Hosted by me, your host, Jell. But until then, hey, here's Signal of Science by... wait. If finally started working. Everything's great with the world. Okay, the weather. Today, it is sunny. High of 80, low of 57. Tomorrow, it'll be mostly sunny. High of 81, low of 61. Friday, it's going to be sunny. High of 87, low of 65. You see what I mean? Highs in the 80s, lows in the 60s. Saturday, it'll be sunny again. High of 91, low of 69. And Sunday, it will be sunny once more. High of 95, low of 71. So you might want to get some sunscreen. It's looking warm this week. Anyway, that concludes our news and weather. Finally, after a short break where we listen to Signal of Science by In Mickle Drive, we will begin GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Until then, please enjoy the music, and thank you so much for listening. Hello, you're listening to 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. I'm your host, Jell, and we love to kick the show off by talking about what games were released this week, what's coming out next week, and what anime will be hitting theaters. So, this week, on PS4, let's preface this, on PlayStation 4, what came out this week? Well, Claddun returns. This is Sengoku. Claddun stands for Classic Dungeon. It's sort of an action roguelike series, with the big twist being that you can actually, draw your own character sprites. They did one called Legasista, which actually let you have, HD-ish sprites that you could draw on your computer and then upload to your PS3. Now we're back to the more pixelated sprites, but it's all cool because that's just a really cool feature. But weirdly, as much as I've played all three of the previous games, I never quite got into them, though. They were kind of eh. But, yeah, after that, Clicker Heroes, Transcendence Starter Pack, okay. Dark Rose Valkyrie, which is some kind of Idea Factory compile heart game. Dirt 4, that's some off-road racing. Dreadnought Hunter Pack, okay. Jump Stars, which has nothing to do with Shonen Jump at all. I saw that show up on the release list, and I was like, what? There's a new Jump game? But why was the last one Jump Ultimate All-Stars, and this one is just Jump Stars? It's because it's just about jumping stars, and not about Shonen Jump and the stars of it. Okay. Anyway, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy Episode 2, Under Pressure, has been released, along with The Neighborhood, Prison Architect Psych Ward, Randall, Special Delivery, which is a PlayStation VR game that's pretty much Paperboy in VR. Unfortunately, I hear it sucks unless you have a Verzoom exercise bike. People were talking about, they were saying, yeah, no, you lean your head in order to turn, and you just can't turn fast enough to make the game playable, which is a darn shame, because it is a really obvious Paperboy knockoff. They copied all the enemies. I kind of would have liked to... I never really got into Paperboy, but I'd kind of like to play VR Paperboy. Oh, hey, Super Beat Exonic also came out, which is, music game. Elder Scrolls Online Morrowind expansion came out. The Town of Light, Victor Vran Overkill Edition, and Wipeout Omega Collection. And today, a game called Perception is coming out. And, oh, wow. On the 9th, we get Broken Age and Rogue Stormers. Rogue Stormers being I think that's a 4-player randomly generated Contra-like game. It's been on PC for a while. Anyway, on to the Xbox One. What's going on that? Well, it got Dirt 4 and Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy Episode 2 Under Pressure, Neighborhood, Perception, Elder Scrolls Online Morrowind, and The Town of Light. Today, though, it is getting a game called Refunked and a game called Zazen, and it is also getting Super Beat Exonic. And then on the 9th, Colot, Prison Architect, Psych Ward, and Rogue Stormers. I don't know what Colot is. Let's see. PlayStation Vita also got Claddun Returns of Sengoku, Farming Simulator 18, and Plague Road. And on the 9th, it will be getting Broken Age and Demo The Last Recital. On the Switch, tomorrow it should be getting a game called Go Near. I don't know what that is. Also tomorrow, the 3DS will be getting Anime Workshop, which is sort of a animation program for your 3DS you can mess around with. So that's a thing. Anything I'm missing? Nope, that about sums up what came out this week, or is coming out if it's not out already. What about next week? Well, PlayStation 4 will be getting Cars 3 Driven to Win, and a boxed version of Psychonauts in the Rhombus of Room, which is a VR game. It will also be getting a game called Pixel Heroes Bite and Magic. I get it now. Now that I've said it aloud, I get it. Bite and Magic. Like Might and Magic. Great. Y'all are geniuses. Xbox One will be getting Cars 3 Driven to Win and Air Missions Hind and Tour de France 2017 next week. The Wii U will be getting Cars 3 Driven to Win, which should be the final Wii U game next week. This is Cars 3 for your Wii U. That was the last game. Yay. PlayStation Vita, what are you getting next week? Nothing. Gonna have to wait till the week after. Nintendo Switch is also getting Cars 3 Driven to Win. And ARMS! Yes, okay, ARMS. That should be next Friday, right? Yes, next Friday for ARMS. Good. I'm happy about that. That might be why I bought a Switch. And, yeah, nothing really on 3DS next week. Wow, next week seems like a really sparse release week. Okay, that about sums that up. I said the Xbox One stuff, right? Yeah, Cars 3 Driven to Win. Yeah, I think it's getting too close to E3 now, not to mention a bunch of things came out. Then again, oftentimes they'll announce a bunch of, this is coming out, like 2 days before they come out. That happens sometimes. Anyway, anime in theaters. Next Monday, June 12th, and Wednesday, June 14th, Black Butler, Book of the Atlantic will be coming to theaters. It will be at the Tivoli and at Warenberg Ronnie's 20. One showing, 7 p.m. The Monday one will be subtitled. The Wednesday one will be dubbed. Again, Landmark Tivoli and Warenberg Ronnie's 20, 7 p.m. So that's the deal for Black Butler. Not getting a super wide release, but if you wanna see Black Butler in theaters, that's where it's showing up. And then we have the G-Kids Studio Ghibli Fest 2017, where they are putting a new Studio Ghibli film in theaters every month. This month, it is My Neighbor Totoro, which will be Sunday, June 25th, and Monday, June 26th. And that will be at the Mills, basically at the Regal Theaters. It's looking like it's going to be at, like, almost all the Regal Theaters. But mostly, I can guarantee it'll be at the Mills, the Regal St. Louis Stadium 18. And those are the anime that are in theaters. So, I do believe that wraps up our anime in theaters and new game release reports. Now I'm going to kick you back to the music. We've got Hairspray by Runner Up, which is apparently a local artist. Please enjoy that, and when we get back, we'll start talking game news. Because Tekken 7 just came out. There's plenty of things to talk about there. But generally, it's a much slower week than last week. Last week was crazy. So, please enjoy the music here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. Hello, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. I'm your host, Jell, and no wonder the news is a little slow right now. I thought E3 was in July. I was wrong. E3's next week. Yep. June 13th to 15th is going to be E3, so there's going to be a whole bunch of E3 while I'm on the air. In the off chance someone doesn't know, E3 is it's the Electronics Entertainment Expo, and it's the big video game show where pretty much everyone releases trailers for the new games that are going to be coming out for the rest of the year, and some of the ones that will be in the far future as well. So it is one of the... It's kind of a thing. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to kick you back to the music again, because things are apparently exploding. So, here is Everywhere I Go from Adrian Julius Caesar. Please enjoy, and thank you so much for listening.
I tell you what.
listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind, and welcome back again to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. So, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by random strobe lights, so, no wonder there's not a lot of news. Everyone's saving it for E3, which is next week. So, that caught me a little bit off guard. I did not expect that. So, that's going to be happening. I seriously thought it was in July. But good, fine, June. June's good. I can do June, so next week I am probably going to wind up I should have a wall of news because E3 will be going on in the middle of the show, so just gonna be smacked in the face after every break with new information. But right now, not too terribly much news going on. Nintendo, though, did give a price for their online service. I can't say it on the air because we are a non-profit, non-promotional station, but it's like a third of the price of everyone else, which makes sense because Nintendo has, like, a third of the online games you would want to play compared to everyone else. This was the thing I was really worried about when Nintendo said you're going to have to pay for online now, which you don't have to do yet, and they actually pushed back when they're going to actually implement their full-fledged online service until I think they said early next year, which is good, so we all get free online for right now. But I was worried about that because, like, I played a good chunk of online games on the Wii U. I loved my Mario Kart 8, I loved my Splatoon. Good times were had, but I couldn't imagine paying a monthly fee to play Splatoon online no matter how much I loved it. But Nintendo is apparently recognizing this fact and going so low that it's actually kind of nice. And on top of that, they earlier said that, okay, you're going to get to play a new retro game every month, but then it's only for like that month. They've switched that out. They're like, okay, fine. We're going to release our virtual console games where you get a free one every month, and as long as you stay subscribed to the service and connected to the internet, you'll be able to play those games. So it'll be like the free games you get on PlayStation 4 and presumably Xbox One as well. So good. They're going to do that, and they're actually saying that some of their virtual console games will actually have online play themselves. So you'll be able to play, like, Super Mario Bros. 3 online with a second player, or original Mario Bros., or, like, Balloon Fight online. Actually, I'd be slightly excited about playing Urban Champion online. I have a soft spot for Urban Champion. It's so simple, but it's alright. Urban Champion's not bad, it's just old. But, on the flip side, we do have to remember that the way Nintendo is handling voice chat is the most convoluted and stupid thing possible. So you won't be able to actually voice chat through the console. Instead, you'll be voice chatting through the phone. It will use a cell phone app for creating Nintendo Switch parties and chat groups and things like that. And at that point, I just sit there and go, what's even the point of the app? I could just call them up on the phone. I could just load up Skype on my cell phone and use that. What's even the point? Really? So we're going to pay a monthly fee and you're not even going to, like, route our voice chat to one another? I don't even know what to say about that, especially because I don't have a smartphone. Because I have a bad tendency to lose phones a lot. So I've just stuck with, like, cheapy little track phone things. I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I want to see how much this is actually going to affect my online experience if Nintendo has a plan for person playing Nintendo Switch doesn't have a cell phone. That is an unusual barrier. And, like, don't even get me started on the Nintendo Switch headsets and things. Which, like, I think you'd have to have a specific model of phone since everyone's getting rid of their headphone jacks. So you need an adapter? I don't know. Everything is stupid right now. So I don't know what exactly they're thinking. But let's see. Other than that, here was a fun thing. The Nintendo did, of course, their second ARMS test punch. And the fan demand for Twin Tell was so high, they added her to the second Arms Test Punch. No, the other new character, just Twintelle. They're like, wow, the fans really want Twintelle in here. We'll put Twintelle in here. And I'm going to say, she was very good. I really hope they let us mix and match Arms and ranked matches, because otherwise Twintelle's going to be really, really good. She has a great starter array of arms, and I figured out how to get some maneuverability out of her. See, Twintelle's special ability is that she can, like, slow down any punches that are getting near her by holding the dash button. And on the ground, not that useful. But in the air, when you do the whole slow down time thing, that not only lets you hover in the air, but when you release it, you boost off in a direction. So for, like, maximum just ground coverage with Twintelle, what you want to do is you want to dash, jump, dash, hold, release. So that way you dash on the ground, cancel your dash into a jump, then air dash, and then you start holding to freeze in midair, then release to boost off in another direction. And oh, egad, you're going to want to change your direction, like, as much as possible in that. Like, there's, like, a great thing is to, like, to dash right and hold, then release to the left. Like, you can get some good, good horizontal coverage with Twintelle. She doesn't have the verticality of Ribbon Girl, but yeah, you can get some good ground coverage. And her default weapons, okay, her just regular boxing glove is ice. And then she has a Thunderbird that's, thunder. So that's two different stunning status effects on two fast, very good weapons. And then she has the Umbrella, which just blocks a lot of shots and is really good. It's a great defensive weapon. Everyone else, it's like, oh, there's two weapons, then one that's kind of eh. With Twintelle's like, no, they're all great. She came in second. Like, Nintendo was looking at which characters people were preferring. Twintelle came in second, despite only being there for half of the test punches. First place goes to Ninjara, because Ninjara is really looking like the best character. People like him quite a lot, mostly because his air dash makes him teleport, and you can abuse that to, like, get behind your opponent. You can actually teleport faster than the camera can rotate, which sounds cheap, but then I realized you have to get in really, really close to pull that off. But yeah, people are just pulling out Ninjara tactics, and Ninjara has great arm selection too. Anyway, I think I'm gonna have to kick you back to some diverse PSAs for your diverse mind. But when we come back, we'll continue talking about video games. That's what we do here on GameBabble Live. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and please stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Hello and welcome back to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is some more GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. So, before the break, we were talking about Twintelle and Arms, and the Arms Test Punch, which I feel went pretty darn well. And we also talked about the Nintendo Switch's online. So let's see, what else is there? Well, recently, Nintendo's getting to dominate the news today. Nintendo did a Pokemon Direct. It was very short, but basically they confirmed Pokken Tournament will be coming to Nintendo Switch. It's called Pokken Tournament DX, and it's going to add in 5 more characters, 4 of which were released in arcades, and one of them will be Switch exclusive. But Pokken Tournament DX adds Croagunk, Darkrai, Empoleon, Scizor, and exclusive to Switch, Decidueye, which is the friggin' owl archer from Pokemon Sun and Moon. And speaking of Pokemon Sun and Moon, they announced that Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon will be coming to 3DS as well. These are basically they say they'll have a slightly different storyline and more clothing options and things will be a little different. I'm curious to see how different they'll be, and I'm still sitting here wondering where our Nintendo Switch port is. Because, of course, everyone is expecting Nintendo to port Pokemon Sun and Moon to some capacity to the Switch. Some rumors say that it's going to be like Pokemon Star is going to be the one on Switch. We will find out soon enough. More than likely, they'd be saving that for E3. I don't know. But I am glad to hear that Pokken Tournament is coming to the Switch. They've said it will be able to do 2 players on a single console. It'll even have 3-on-3 King of Fighters style team battles. So it is going to take advantage of the capabilities of the Switch to some degree. The trailer showed a lot of 2 people like playing with the little half Joy-Con things. So that's all very nice. I like the game. I'm glad to see that it's hasn't been abandoned. I talked about it last week. Pokken Tournament is a weird game. It is not Pokemon Tekken. It is literally 2 completely different fighting games smashed together and rapidly switches between them. It's pretty freaking nutty. So, yeah, don't underestimate Pokken. It's a weird game. If you hit up my YouTube channel, I actually put a way back when the original Pokken Tournament hit the Wii U, I put up a video explaining how the game works. It says how to play Pokken in less than 5 minutes. And yeah, it's just a very weird game, because the way Pokken works, if you've never played it, is that you have 2 phases. You got the field phase, and you have the close range phase. The field phase, it plays like the Gundam Extreme Versus games, Virtualon, what's some other ones? Kind of like the Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm games, where you're running freely around a field and throwing projectiles at one another. Then, when you hit with a strong enough projectile, it switches to a side view, and now it plays like Street Fighter with simplified inputs. And, it's just direction plus button equals moves. All the inputs are easy, but it's really weird because, well, it's literally a completely different gameplay style with almost a completely different move list. So you're going in there, you're doing 6 juggle combos, and then after you hit with a strong enough attack or do a particularly powerful combo, it switches you back to field phase. And the reason it does that, that's actually like a combo limiter, so that way you can't like demolish someone in a single combo. The game breaks it up by switching between the 2 different gameplay styles. Which sounds terrible, except that it also rewards you with a gigantic pile of super meter every time you can get the styles to switch, so it wants you to keep going back and forth between field phase and close range combat phase, just back and forth. Just keep changing the genre, please. Pokken Tournament is weird. It's almost like playing a fighting game version of WarioWare, okay? It's more than a little nuts. So I'm glad to see it back. I like that game. Beyond that, they've said that 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim will be coming to the States. They still haven't told us what kind of game it is. If you're unfamiliar, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is a new Vanillaware game. It involves giant robots and is actually set in modernish time. So a huge departure from the usual Vanillaware fare, which, by the way, is not Dragon's Crown. Vanillaware made Dragon's Crown, but that game was very different from their other games. I hate it when people judge Vanillaware games based entirely on Dragon's Crown. No. That was them experimenting with a very different art style and character design aesthetic. Something that was more hardcore fantasy rather than the fairy tale look they usually go for. And this is really far out there, because like I've never seen Vanillaware's painterly art style used for like schoolgirls and giant robots. It's kind of weird to me, even though I know that George Kamitani loves to draw stuff like that, because he's done it before. So I just want to know what kind of game this is. I'm completely lost. Also, the new Final Fantasy Dissidia will be coming to PS4 in early 2018. Finally, if you're unfamiliar, they've had a Final Fantasy Dissidia arcade version, which is like the Final Fantasy fighting game of sorts. They've had an arcade version in Japanese arcades for a while, and they've been slowly adding characters to it. And everyone's been wondering, what's that coming to PS4? Well, now it's coming to PS4, early 2018. Finally, something almost resembling a date. And, let's see, anything else, or do we start talking about Tekken now? It looks like it's Tekken time. So, Tekken 7 came out, and it was interesting. I picked it up on PS4, and the PS4 version has, like, a bunch of bonus things, like it's got music from all the past games, and it's got retro costumes. It even has a VR mode that's kind of crap. I tried it. The VR mode is you get a character model viewer, and you can kind of sort of fight with it. Like, there's a mode where you can fight in VR. You're not, like, as the character, but you're still just spectating in VR in a completely flat, empty stage with no life bars. And that's the part that annoys me. Like, you can't win and you can't lose. It's just empty stage, no life bar, two characters wailing on each other. And, like, you can do things, oh, I can slow down time and I can zoom in. Yay, that's great. Except, I'd like to fight in VR. Can you just stick some life bars on there? Namco said if there was interest, they would improve the VR mode and add more to it, which is good because I'd like some life bars there. But yeah, they need to add and improve to other modes, because I'm going to say Tekken 7 is the sparsest Tekken content-wise since Tekken 2. Like, there's almost nothing in here other than the story mode. Now, Tekken 7 has a very nice cinematic story mode. The story's dumb. It's a fighting game story, but it has a flashy, nice cinematic story mode where it smoothly transitions from cutscenes into battle, relatively smoothly anyway. And yeah, you get to find out the history of the Mishimas and you punch people, and it's great. And Akuma from Street Fighter actually plays a huge role in the story. And that's all fine and dandy. Good times to be had. But yeah, that's pretty much it for single-player content. There are character endings, but the way they're handled is really weird. Like, when you beat arcade mode, you don't get anything. They're not in the arcade mode. Instead, as you play through the main story mode, you unlock character episodes, which is you get a wall of text introduction, you do one rival fight, and then you get an ending. And all the endings are kind of disappointing. Like, seriously. I just wasn't impressed. They were all done in real time, so that's nice, but yeah, no, like, really super crazy endings as such because of it. Because it's all, oh, well, we're standing on this stage, and now we're going to, like, talk at each other, and things happen. The endings are very disappointing. And then when it comes to single-player content outside of story mode, you have the useless arcade mode, treasure battle, which is where you, like, earn money to buy, like, customization parts, and practice mode, and that's it. No survival mode, no team battle, arcade mode borders on useless. There's not a lot of single-player content, and, like, no bonus wacky minigame, no Tekken Ball, no Tekken Bowl, no Tekken Force. Now, the online is very nice when it works. Right now, there's been some matchmaking issues on PS4, but netcode's good when I, like, create a group with friends and we hang out, but ranked matchmaking's busted. There's an online tournament mode that's apparently pretty darn cool. Haven't had a chance to sit down with that. The matchmaking's kind of wonky, but... and I'm not good at Tekken either. But, yeah, it's like... this is a game you buy for the online play. The single player is very sparse. Better than Street Fighter V at launch, but it's a very, very sparse single player thing. And here's where things get interesting. Tekken 7 is actually better on PC than it is on PlayStation 4 by a significant margin. Apparently, it's actually well optimized. The graphics look significantly better. The online play is running purportedly better than the PlayStation 4 as well. And the load times are faster. And that's important because I'm going to say the PlayStation 4 load times on Tekken 7 are pretty darn bad. Now, I haven't tried the Xbox One load times, but I would bet money they're even worse because the Xbox One usually has kind of bad load times. I'm actually surprised at how slow the load times are. Also, it is worth mentioning that Tekken 7's install was actually a little bit slow. It took a good, 10-15 minutes to install. So, again, still better than what I get on Xbox One, but this is actually quite surprising. Because in the past, PS4 games would install almost instantly. But now we're starting to see games that take longer to install. Thus far, Farpoint has had the slowest install. Tekken 7 has had sort of a medium speed install. It's okay. And Star Trek Bridge Crew also had a kind of slowish install. It's like, that's actually quite surprising and interesting. But it's still not bad. But I am wondering what this means for the future of PlayStation 4 games and their install times. Moving on with Tekken 7, though. Since it is available on PC, people have data mined the crap out of it. The game is going to get 2 DLC guest characters, purportedly one from a game and one from an anime, but they already have some placeholder files in the game, with one of them having a meter system like Eliza and Akuma. If you're unfamiliar, Akuma in Tekken 7 actually plays very different from all the other Tekken characters. Like, he plays a little Tekken-y, but he has his, quarter circle motions to throw fireballs and hurricane kicks and shoryukens, and there's actually a super meter system so he can do EX moves and supers, unlike everyone in Tekken 7. And Eliza does the same thing. Eliza was, who's the pre-order DLC character. She was like a test run for Akuma. So it's really weird. It's really weird seeing characters that are like that. We know that the swimsuits, Idolmaster cosplay, and school uniforms for all the characters will be DLC, despite them having been in the arcade version for a while. We found placeholder files for them. And apparently, word on the street is Tekken Bowl will be the DLC game mode, and it is going to cost about as much as if they were selling Tekken Bowl separately as a game instead of as part of a game. And that kind of disappoints me. It's like, really? I would consider paying that money if it was Tekken Force. But really, Tekken Bowl, and you're going to charge more money for that? Cripes. All the PlayStation 4 exclusive content is still in the data on all the versions of the game. It's dummied out, so maybe it'll become available later on to other systems. And that's what we're currently looking at with Tekken 7. Now, it needs to be said, as much as I rag on the game for its lack of modes, a wonky launch for the online on PlayStation 4, and some questionable DLC practices, credit where credit's due, gameplay's great, controls are tight, graphics are fantastic. So if you're just, I love Tekken, I want to play me some Tekken, Tekken 7 sure is some Tekken. I would definitely say it plays better than Tekken 6 and Tekken Tag Tournament, and I'd say it plays better than Tekken. I would say it might well be the best playing Tekken since Tekken Tag 1. I need to sit down and really do some comparisons there, but it plays very nicely. I thought some of the backgrounds were a little bland, but plays very nicely, controls very well, and again, looks gorgeous. A very good looking game. And yeah, it does still have some degree of character customization, not as much as Tekken Tag 2, but you can still dress up your characters in goofy outfits and stuff like that. It's just really lacking in hair options. So, that's what we're looking at with Tekken 7. It's pretty good, but it's a little sparse in some of the content areas. Anyway, I am going to kick you back to the music. Next up is a song called Spicy Cherry Soda by Sleepy and the Bedtimes. As an interesting side note, Spicy Cherry Soda is how they describe the flavor of Dr. Pepper and Mr. Pibb. So if you ever wondered what that flavor is, it's officially classified as Spicy Cherry. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for a diverse mind. Time for a slightly longer break before we start talking about more things. So please enjoy the music, and thank you so much for listening. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. And since E3 is coming up, next week, the news has slowed to sort of a trickle because everyone's sort of holding back for E3. But hey, guess what? Apparently someone still cares enough about Mass Effect Andromeda to patch it. Apparently Mass Effect Andromeda patch 1.08 makes JAL a a romance option for anyone playing a male character. Which I'm sure that's going to cause some degree of controversy that, all of a sudden Joel's bisexual after this patch, but apparently people were data mining the game and found that the romance option was like half finished and already in there, so it was planned and just didn't make the final cut, which makes sense because I'm hearing, like, according to Silicon Era, that because he wasn't dateable, if you were playing a male writer, male main character, and last name's Ryder, if you were playing a male main character and you were only going after gay relationships, you couldn't get the matchmaker achievement or trophy. It's like, that's a side note for sight. Don't you think, Mass Effect Andromeda? Oh, wait, you've got a ton of those. Oh, I almost feel sorry for this game. Apparently, they're also adding in some new complexions and hairstyle options, and the customizations being improved as well. Hey, maybe one day I'll actually play this game. Like, I kind of feel bad for Mass Effect Andromeda because it got panned so hard for its disastrous launch that they've officially put the Mass Effect series on ice. Like, it's on hold. They're not making a sequel to Andromeda anytime soon. And the game has had so many discounts and drops in price. And it's like, yeah, well, that's what happens when your release is this much of a mess. I don't even know what to say about this, about Andromeda. It's okay, but yeah, it has a lot of problems. And really, they shouldn't have tried to make a follow-up to Mass Effect with so much of the original team missing. It just wasn't going to go well. Anyway, though, so Microsoft is hinting that the Xbox Project Scorpio will have wireless VR support, but first they want to get it running on PC. They've said that they are not prioritizing getting VR onto their consoles. They want a PC first. They want to work out the kinks, and then they want to put it on there. And this is important because wireless VR is currently a hurdle a lot of people are having trouble with. Because when you're streaming video wirelessly like that, it's going to induce at least a little bit of lag. Maybe only a couple milliseconds if you're, like, really sending that signal good. But, it has the chance for frames to get lost or artifacting to happen. Sudden little hiccups and dips, and there's all these issues. And that's why all the VR headsets right now are wired. That's why they do it that way. Because when you're in VR and you're looking around, having sudden jumps and hiccups and drops in video quality like that can be a bit jarring. And, it can get in the way of the experience. And, so Microsoft wants to work out the kinks before they actually implement any sort of VR, so that's not going to be at E3. But they will likely be showing the Scorpio at E3. And it's like, I forgot that was a thing. If you're unfamiliar, the Xbox Project Scorpio is a new Xbox One that will be able to do 4K resolution and be way more powerful, and it's supposed to be just such a better system. And it's like, that's all fine and dandy, except what you gotta do about the fact that no one's releasing Xbox One games. I don't see this actually solving your number one problem. I know some people are very excited for it because it's supposed to be a beefy system. I'm curious what kind of price they're going to have for it. I'm curious how many people are really going to go out and buy a new Xbox One for it. Because I'm going to be real with you people. I don't mean to show a console bias on this show, but the Xbox One doesn't have a lot. Like, most of the things that are coming to Xbox One also come to PS4. And, like, there's not a lot of exclusives, and I just found using the Xbox One to be unpleasant due to its terrible, terrible interface, and mine's been collecting dust. I've been meaning to dust it off so I can download that free copy of Phantom Dust, poke at that, but I think that about sums up most of my opinion on the Xbox One, and I'm clearly not alone. The PlayStation 4 is doing a lot better, and I don't think Project Scorpio is going to help. For me personally, I go where the obscure low-budget Japanese games go, and the Xbox One is a little lacking in that. And those are going to be the hardest ones to convince people to actually put on the Xbox One. And Microsoft kind of, like, back at the launch of the 360, Microsoft was very supportive of trying to get Japanese companies on board with their system. But that shifted over time as the importance of Japanese developers slowly decreased. And because of that, it's they've kind of ignored it. Not to mention Microsoft of Japan is a bunch of idiots. Like, the things they did on the 360 with the 360 is just kind of embarrassing. So, yeah, I don't know how Microsoft is really going to bolster their game library in any meaningful way. And it almost sounds like they don't even care, because, of course things are freezing up over here. I've got a quote from them that makes it sound like they're really starting to give less of a crap about their Xbox One in this article on TechRadar.com about the Scorpio's VR. Let's see. Our primary focus is making our mixed reality experiences a success on Windows 10 PCs. Alex Kipman, technical fellow at Microsoft, told Polygon in an interview. We believe that right now a Windows PC is the best platform for mixed reality, as its open ecosystem and enormous installed base offers the best opportunity for developers, and Windows offers the most choices for consumers. It really sounds like Microsoft is turning the Xbox One into basically a Windows box, I guess would be the best way to describe it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But, yeah, it sounds less like they care about, especially because they've implemented that thing where you can play, like, pretty much every Xbox One game on Windows 10, if you're willing to upgrade to Windows 10. So, yeah, that's the weird place the Xbox One is in. It intentionally makes itself pointless. And yeah, I don't know how much the Scorpio's really gonna fix that. Whew. So, I don't know about you, but I'm gonna take a quick break. Let's see, did any new news pop up? No, not really. Death Stranding, which is Hideo Kojima's new game, is not gonna be at E3. That's okay. Yeah, so no really major news has popped up recently. I'm gonna kick y'all back to the music while I take a quick break, and then when we get back, we're gonna talk about Shantae, because Shantae Half Genie Hero will be coming to the Switch tomorrow, and I might maybe have kickstarted that game to the tune of $200. So we'll talk about the Shantae series, because I'm a bit of a huge fan of the series. Have been one since about 2 years before the first game came out, and there's a story behind that. So I'm going to talk about that after we take a quick break. So please stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Coming up next, we've got Like You That Way by Canan Smith. Please enjoy, and thank you so much for listening. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, or at least a short GameBabble Live break before we hit the half hours for PSAs, and then we're going to really talk about Shantae. But there's something I forgot to mention. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Gundam Versus is coming to America, finally, in a non-busted Vita version. If you're unfamiliar, the Gundam Versus series, I've been saying that a lot today, haven't I? Anyway, the Gundam Versus series is a very Virtualon-esque mecha combat game. Super high speed, pick a Gundam, go online against other Gundams, and you're dashing around and throwing out special attacks. Again, very Virtualon-esque if you've ever played that. It's sort of taken the place of Virtualon, in fact. And they've released, like, a ton of these games. Some of them date back to the PS2 era, and some of those, I think, actually came to America, like Gundam Federation vs. Zeon. They used to be Capcom games. And if you ever played the underrated GameCube classic Gotcha Force, that's built on the Gundam Versus engine. Either way, the team that made Gundam Versus, which I think was called King, they were kind of a stealth developer. They wound up pretty much being bought by Bandai Namco, since they're the ones who own the Gundam license, and now they make those in-house. And yeah, on PlayStation 3, they had Gundam Extreme Versus, which was amazing and super fun. And, it's one of those things where you sit there and you go, why isn't this coming to America? There shouldn't be any licensing issues since it's all Gundam. But for some reason, those didn't come to America. Well, now they realize, hey, maybe we should release those in America. So, Gundam Versus for PS4 will be coming to America. And I was trying to find some information on what mobile suits are going to be in the game. And according to the Gundam Wiki, they are saying that pretty much the entire roster of Gundam Wing, the Endless Waltz, that's what it's called, Endless Waltz. I keep forgetting the name of the OVA movie thing. But pretty much the entire roster of Gundam Wing Endless Waltz should be in there. So the Wing Zero, Death Scythe Hell, Heavy Arms Kai, Sandrock Kai, Ultron, Epion, Tallgeese, and Tallgeese 2. Those should all be in there, supposedly. However, I question this, I question the validity of this, and I'm very surprised because I don't see anything from G Gundam in there. And they usually remember to at least get the Burning Gundam into a Gundam Versus, because G Gundam is literally all about one-on-one Gundam fighting. It is the close-range Gundam. You put it in everything. I know G Gundam is the least popular Gundam in Japan, but you always include the friggin' thing. So I'm kind of surprised by that, but I don't know how accurate this list is. If this list is accurate, that's quite a hefty roster, but since they're restarting on PS4, I'm a little But also, new to the PS4 version, Gundam Versus is normally played in 2-on-2 teams. PS4 one is also going to have 3-on-3 teams. I'm kind of excited to see how that plays out. The chaos will be immeasurable. But, super excited to play. Oh, geez, I'm going to need an arcade stick. Just remember, Gundam Versus plays best with an arcade stick. You don't really want to use a controller for this one, so this is going to be a weird one. Anyway, back to the music. Next up is Paris by the Chainsmokers, which interestingly has a PlayStation VR interactive experience thing that you can download for free on your PS4. I still haven't grabbed that myself, but hey, now I'm going to hear the song. So here's Paris by the Chainsmokers. This is 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, and thank you so much for listening. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. This is Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. As I said, I'm your host, Jell, and before a rather lengthy break, I said that it was time to talk about Shantae. Now, if you're going to say it again, aren't I? So, the Shantae series has recently skyrocketed in popularity after the recent Kickstarter for the game Shantae Half Genie Hero, which will now be hitting the Nintendo Switch tomorrow. And I might maybe have donated $200 to that Kickstarter. But not without good reason, because I don't normally donate to Kickstarters. But me and the Shantae series, we go way back. I actually managed to be a fan about 2 years before the first game even came out, which probably sounds surprising, but it's sort of a wacky story. Basically, way back in, let's see, that was probably 1999, sometime in 1999, I was in a Best Buy, and I saw this game for the Game Boy Color called Extreme Sports. And I took a look at it, and I said, wow, this is really colorful and has nice character designs. Too bad I don't care about sports. And I flipped over the back of the box, and I was like, wait, is this an RPG? Sure enough, Extreme Sports was an RPG, and I pondered whether or not I wanted to pick the game up, waffled on it. Eventually, I was like, yo, I gotta play it. Let's get Extreme Sports. And so I picked it up, and sure enough, it was a weird Extreme Sports RPG. And I was blown away by the visuals for a Game Boy Color game, because the sprites looked really good, the characters were really well animated, and it was kind of fun. The way it worked was a lot like, imagine Pokemon, except instead of getting into trainer battles, you did different Extreme Sports challenges. And that's what Extreme Sports on Game Boy Color was. And if you're curious about the game, they did re-release it on the 3DS's eShop as a Game Boy Color download thing. So if you're curious about this game, you can get it there. It's okay. It was definitely before WayForward's music started getting good. But I looked at the game, and I was like, wow, I really love the art for this game. Who did it? Matt Bozon? That's not a Japanese name. I don't even think that's an Earth name. So I Googled Matt Bozon's name, found his old website, which was super crazy, and also found an interview on IGN where he talked about his next game, which was called Shantae. This was a game he and his wife Erin had wanted to make back on Super Nintendo, but they just didn't get the opportunity to do it. They wanted to do a PC one. That also, they just didn't get the opportunity to do it. Like, this game dates back to, like, 94, 95 was when they were first working on it, and recently people have unearthed, like, an internet archive of their WayForward's really old website, and it's amazing how much of that game actually made it into the Game Boy Color game. Like, I recognize a lot of those scenes. But, yeah, as they were working on Extreme Sports and made the engine for that game, they were like, wow, we could get some really good graphics out of the Game Boy Color. Hey, we could probably make that Shantae game you wanted to make. And so, in between projects, they worked on that. Because, you see, the thing with WayForward is that for a lot of their early existence, they did edutainment games and really dumb parody games. Like, they did Micro Suck Wind Blows, which was actually a thing released on PC. They did, like, a 3D arcade fun pack. They did a lot of dumb things. Like, they even made the Beethoven game. The dog. They made the Beethoven game for the Sega Pico, if you even remember that thing. I still need to get one of those. Yeah, funny story. Sega Pico is one of the only Sega consoles with a Nintendo game on it. They made a Pokemon edutainment title for the Pico in Japan. But I'm getting off track here. I find that just very fascinating, though. So anyway, they had been making, like, edutainment games early on, and then later, and this is still what they do, WayForward's bread and butter has been making cheap licensed games, actually. They generally make a decent engine and then show it around, and then if anyone needs a licensed game made, they make it there. But in between licensed projects, they were working on Shantae in their free time. And they got the game done, but they couldn't find a publisher. No one wanted to touch it, because Shantae required the absolute maximum size Game Boy Color cartridge with battery back memory, meaning that it was like the most expensive kind of Game Boy Color game you could produce. And on top of that, it was a new IP from an unknown developer that no one knows about, and no one wanted to take a risk. It took them about a year to find a publisher, and what they found was Capcom. Unfortunately, back then, Capcom took a year to release anything. I remember this because this was back when the Dreamcast was around, and there were a ton of Capcom games that I had already imported the Japanese copy of and had to wait like a year or more for a US release. Street Fighter Alpha 3 on Dreamcast was like one of the worst ones. Like, the game's already translated. It's done. Just port it. But we waited like more than a year for that. They delayed Alpha 3 on Dreamcast so much. So yes, it took them another year to get Shantae released on the Game Boy Color. And this is where problems arise. Because you see, the Game Boy Advance was weird. They didn't really foreshadow its release very much. I remember this. There was no, oh, we're working on this system, and here's like a preview. No. Like, a few months before the Game Boy Advance came out, they were like, bam, Game Boy Advance is coming. Comes in like 2 or 3 months. And I was like, what the, huh? I remember I was subscribed to Nintendo Power at the time. I was like, whoa, there's a new Game Boy coming out. I gotta get that. And then it just comes out. It's just out of nowhere with no warning or fanfare. Just smack you in the face with a new console. So in the time it took from when Shantae was completed to actually being released, the Game Boy Advance was announced, released, and WayForward made their first game on it and got that released before Shantae ever got released. For the record, that was actually Scorpion King Sword of Osiris, which is okay. I was annoyed by the second stage, but yeah, WayForward made a Scorpion King game on the Game Boy Advance. It's kind of fun. And yeah, they did all of that in the time it took Capcom. It took them to find a publisher and get the game released. Now, the original Shantae received like 9 out of 10s across the board, and rave reviews, because of course it did. It was the most impressive game on Game Boy Color. The animation was super smooth. They were doing visual effects that the Game Boy Color shouldn't have been capable of. Just the sheer amount of parallax scrolling that they had going on. The way they had a day-night cycle where, like, the colors palette for the whole stage changed. Things like that shouldn't have been possible on the Game Boy Color. People were like, that just isn't. And then they did it. So it was really impressive. And the game itself, honestly, of all the Shantae games, the first one has the best sense of adventure. Like, it was a Metroidvania as the term Metroidvania was still being coined. Like, we've had Metroidvanias in the past, but we didn't have a name for them. I would say Castlevania Circle of the Moon would be about when they started using the phrase Metroidvania, but even that doesn't really describe Shantae, because while it is kind of one of those kinds of games, it's also kind of Zelda-ish. It's like a Metroid Zelda, because that's the thing, and part of why I like Shantae was that it had this ring-shaped overworld. It's a side-scroller, but if you kept, like, scrolling to the side, you'd eventually loop back around. It had this big old overworld, and then you had a bunch of dungeons that you went into. And I really like that setup. I'm going to be honest, I don't like the Metroidvania genre, but the overworld with dungeon setup was great. There was tons of secret things to collect. It was one of the meatiest games on Game Boy Color, but it was not without its flaws. Namely, in order to get those big, beautiful sprites on screen, the camera is way too zoomed in, so there's a lot of leaps of faith, and the visibility in the game is actually really bad. And the gorgeous animation means that the hair whip attack is a bit too slow and doesn't have the range it really needs. So it's a little funky there. And in order to run, you hold A and press forward. And I don't know why you would ever walk. In fact, they took out walking in future Shantae games. I know Shantae Risky's Revenge, they had it where you hold A to walk, and then Pirate's Curse, they just completely removed walking altogether. Because why would you ever walk? But, yeah, so the game was very impressive, not without its flaws, but very nice. But here was a problem. The Game Boy Advance was already out. Now, there's actually another interesting thing about the original Shantae. Because, you see, as the Game Boy Advance came out, WayForward tried playing some of their games on it, because it's backwards compatible. And they realized that the original Game Boy Advance made all the Game Boy Color games look really dark and muddy. So they actually not really recalled the game, but before Shantae was released, they were like, hey, hold on a second, let's put in a special feature. So they put in a feature where if you put Shantae in a Game Boy Advance, it would say that it was Game Boy Advance Enhanced. What this meant was that they brightened the colors, so that way they didn't look awful on your Game Boy Advance, and it unlocked a secret room that let you learn the Advanced Dance, which lets you transform into a Tinkerbat, which is one of the normal enemies in the game. So that was kind of neat. that was that was a thing, and yeah, it was a fun bonus feature, and it's one of like I think 2 games that do that. The other one is another Way Forward game called Wendy Witch Every Which Way. Like apparently that's GBA enhanced as well, but that was the problem. The GBA was out; it was the new hotness, and that meant that everyone was buying Game Boy Advance games. No one was looking at Game Boy Color games. You couple that with less than stellar distribution, and the fact that there was, like, no advertising for it, and even though it was, like, a 9 out of 10 kind of game, getting uproarious praise from the press, not a lot of people played it. And it quickly vanished, and this would wind up sort of cursing the series. Because isn't that always the worst thing when there's a really, really good game and it sells like garbage, and, you know, and no one plays it? And I remember people would not give that game a chance, even like playing it free on emulators. And it would take, like, man, let's move on. The popularity for that game is very interesting. So immediately afterwards, though, they're like, okay, we've got an engine ready. Let's get started on Shantae Advance. And they started developing a Game Boy Advance Shantae game. And they got pretty far in. The game was playable. They had a chunk of world map and a dungeon ready, and they showed it to publishers. They were like, we are 3 months away from release. We just have to find a publisher. They never found a publisher. No one wanted to touch that game because it's an unknown series from an unknown developer, and even though the previous game got rave reviews, it sold like a pile of hot garbage. And I actually remember, because this is the thing, I was a fan, so I was following this intently, waiting for the game to get released. And yeah, it took, I was just following it, and I remember, like, multiple times that they had some kind of scheme to get it released, and at one point, I remember Way Forward was like, sign up to our newsletter to prove that you're a Shantae fan, so that way we can show the subscription list to potential publishers and show them how many people care about the game. I remember posting this on message boards back then and be like, you gotta do this. And the general response from people was, they were like, no, the game's garbage. The game is probably garbage if it can't get released. Because if Super Duper Sumos can get released on Game Boy Advance, then this game has to be completely terrible. No, we're not signing it. I got like one person to back me up and say, well, actually, Shantae's a good game. But no one wanted to give it a chance. No one was paying any attention to it, and that was their reasoning. And it's true, Super Duper Sumos is a garbage game that did get released on Game Boy Advance. Why? Because it had a TV show. As they were doing the Kickstarter for Half Genie Hero, they streamed what they had done of Shantae Advance. And they talked about why it couldn't get released, and they said that the American publishers refused to release any Game Boy Advance game that wasn't based on an existing TV series. And when you think about it, it's kind of true. There's some games not based on existing TV series, but they all come from Japanese developers. After the initial wave of games, it was very hard to find a, like, Western-made video game that was original for the Game Boy Advance. That wasn't based on an existing series. And that was why they couldn't get it off the ground. That was literally why they couldn't release Shantae Advance. Shantae Advance has never been released. But that didn't stop them. The new plan at Way Forward was every time they would begin work on a new game engine, they would make a Shantae demo. Apparently there's like tons of like unseen Shantae demos, including like a GameCube one that apparently involves dancing on a raft. So like there's a ton of these unseen Shantae demos, and they use that to like demo their engine to different publishers and people who have like licenses and be like, hey, want to release a Shantae game? It's going to be like this. It's pretty impressive, right? No dice, but it got them a lot of deals. Like, Way Forward, egad, their Game Boy Advance library is insane. They did, like, 3 or 4 SpongeBob games, 4 Barbie games, which, oh, egad, you can feel the executive meddling in there. If you go way back on the GameBabble YouTube channel, I did a full playthrough. This was back when my streaming equipment was pretty crap, but I did a full playthrough of Barbie and the Three Musketeers on the Wii. And that game, imagine like actually a pretty good like Castlevania Shantae-ish game, but then you remove all the enemies. Like, there are almost no enemies in that game, and it's such a shame, because, like, yeah, the stage design isn't bad, there's some pretty good puzzles, animation's really nice. Where are the enemies? Nothing. There are enemies, but there's so few of them, and that's what, like, ruins that game, which could have been okay otherwise. So, yeah, WayForward has done a bunch. They also did Godzilla Domination for the GBA, which is actually where the music for Shantae Advance came from. They hadn't composed any original music for it yet, so they just used the Godzilla music. And now whenever I play Godzilla, I think of Shantae Advance, because some of the songs sound more like Shantae songs than they do Godzilla songs. But anyway, they tried forever to get a new Shantae game out the door, and it just it was not going. And they just had the darndest time getting the game released, and they got a little bit of a turnaround once the DSi came out, allowing them to self-publish their game. Unfortunately, I need to take a short break, so next up is Stand By Me by Florence plus the Machine. And then, a little bit after 2, we will continue the story, my own personal history of the Shantae franchise. Because that seems like a good thing to do, because everyone's clammed up about the news, because they've got E3 coming up. So please enjoy this song. Thank you so much for listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. And we'll be right back. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell. This is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. And before the break, we were talking about the Shantae series, and its difficult time it has had getting released and suddenly popular. It's actually really, really awkward seeing this series be this popular. Anyway, we were talking about Shantae Advance, and yeah, the fact that no one wanted to publish it. But inexplicably, they did get at least one WayForward original game to come out, and that was a game called Sigma Star Saga. Apparently, they were talking with Namco, and they made some kind of deal where Namco gets to keep this is the sad thing, Namco gets to keep the rights to the Sigma Star Saga series. But they would publish it. So, you're never going to see the Sigma Star Saga characters again, unfortunately, unless Namco, releases the rights. But that was pretty much a WayForward original, and it was an attempt to combine RPG with side-scrolling shooter, inspired a good bit by the old NES game Guardian Legend. And it is probably the least WayForward game ever outside of the visual design, because WayForward's original games tend to be colorful and goofy and have female leads. This is the only original game they've had with a male lead, with a very serious storyline that was very dramatic and not, super goofy. It was still kind of colorful, though. Game had plenty of flaws, namely the fact that when you got into the random space battles, sometimes you wound up in a ship that was just complete garbage, and you had no control over that. And it was just dumb. Some ships just controlled like a bucket of crap. But it was an interesting game, and it got a lot of popularity. For a hot minute, it looked like Sigma Star Saga would usurp Shantae as WayForward's flagship game. It got huge accolades at E3. The visuals were very impressive for the Game Boy Advance. Again, fantastic sprite work, great animation. And yeah, that was the direction things looked like they'd be going in. But they still wanted to release that new Shantae game. Well, no luck on GBA. And they're trying on every system they can. And eventually Nintendo announces the DSi, which was a gigantic pile of crap. But the hook with the DSi is that you would be able to download games to it in exchange for losing its backwards compatibility with GBA games. It was a terrible trade-off, to be honest, and the original launch DSIs were garbage. The DSi XL is great, but the old ones had a terrible chalkboard-like texture, and the buttons weren't as responsive as they could be, and it had just abysmal battery life for absolutely no good reason, in exchange for a camera that no one's going to use, and the ability to download games. Okay, but I bought one because I knew Shantae was coming. They tested the water with a puzzle game called Mighty Flip Champs to see if they could get something released onto this network and how much of a pain in the butt it would be. After finding out they could pull it off, they began work on Shantae Risky's Revenge, which was loosely based on Shantae Advance, and their plan was it was going to be episodic, because that was when everyone was going episodic. Yeah, we'll just release games in episode, there won't be any problems with this. Hey, remember Sonic 4? How'd that go? Yeah, Sonic 4 Episode 1 and the rarely talked about Episode 2, which was literally a completely different game because people hated Sonic 4 Episode 1. And just everything felt incomplete. We'll just release games in episodes, it'll be fine. And that was like everyone's plan. And people complained to Way Forward. And then they looked at it and they're like, wow, it's taking us forever to get Shantae released. Because it was. Because I bought a DSi for getting Shantae, and by the time the game came out, I already had a DSi XL, because that was actually a good handheld. And yeah, so it took them forever to get episode 1 done. And so what they said was, like, shortly before release, they said, okay, instead of chopping it up into episodes, we'll give you the full game now, except they didn't. There's actually a ton of content that there's screenshots of, like the snowy mountains with the Reapery guys. That's not in the game. There's tons of content that didn't make it in there. What they actually did was they took episode 1 and realized we're never going to get episode 2 and 3 done on time. So they wrapped up the story, tacked on a final dungeon, and called it a day. So Shantae Risky's Revenge is really about a third of a game. Like, the world feels small, the dungeons feel barely there, but it was still really good. Like, here was the thing. I had waited pretty much a decade for a new Shantae game. Yo, I'd waited a while. And now one's here. And I'm like, good, finally, thank you. And I play it, and hey, guess what? Camera's more zoomed out. Hair Whip is faster and more responsive with better range. It plays way better than the original. The whole jumping into and out of the background thing, I was a little iffy on. I got lost a lot because of it, but it was still kind of cool because of the visual effect. And I played it, and I loved it, and I beat it in about 2.5 hours. And it was good times, yay. But I knew from the fact that there were only 3 transformations and the small size of the world that I only got a third of a game. But I was happy to get anything at this point. Because, oh, egad, the difficulty of getting these games released back then. They just weren't coming out. So I took what I could get. The game was then, like, a year or 2 later, ported to, like, iPhone and Android with, like, an extra bonus mode costume after you beat the game. And then from there, they ported it to the PC. And it received huge accolades and rave reviews all across the board. People loved it. Yay for Shantae, but no one really paid attention. And they said, what we're going to do is we're going to take the content we didn't use, reuse these sprites, and next time we're going to wrap up the story with a game we're going to take our time with and flesh it out. Basically, episodes 2 and 3 or whatever of Risky's Revenge was being merged together and expanded upon into a fuller, more fleshed out game that would eventually become Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. And the game was announced, it got a little trailer, and, you know, it was coming to 3DS, but they began work on it, like, on the regular DS. But it was coming to 3DS It was announced, there was a trailer, and it received little fanfare. Then the Kickstarter happened. The Kickstarter was quite possibly the best thing to ever happen to Shantae, because it hit right in the middle of the Kickstarter gold rush, meaning at almost the exact same time as the Mighty No. 9 Kickstarter. And that was a big deal, because Capcom had pretty much... The thing with Mighty No. 9 was that people love Mega Man. Mega Man was Capcom's mascot, and they had a ton of Mega Man games coming, and suddenly Capcom canceled them all and fired the guy who was, at the time, in charge of the Mega Man series. And people were like, what the heck? And it's like, so what, just no more Mega Man ever? It's just done? What's going on, Capcom? And then the guy, he goes, hey, you know what? I'm formed in my own company, and we're going to do a Kickstarter, and we're going to make Mighty No. 9, and it'll be the spiritual successor to Mega Man. And people were angry at Capcom. They were like, yeah, screw Capcom. We're going to back this game. It's going to be great. It's going to be the new Mega Man. And everyone starts doing that. You know, Ukulele comes next. Hey, this is going to be the next Banjo-Kazooie. And, you know, we were kicked out of Rare, and we're going to make the next, like, true successor to Banjo-Kazooie. Yeah, we'll go back that. Oh, hey, I was kicked out of Konami. I'm going to make the next Castlevania now. Oh, yeah, we'll go back that. Everyone was hopping on this bandwagon, and I can't help but imagine the way that the Shantae thing went down. Because when the Wii U launched, it launched with a game called Mighty Switch Force Hyperdrive Edition, where they took the puzzle game Mighty Switch Force that WayForward had made earlier and gave it HD graphics. And I'm sure someone didn't realize how much work went into that and was like, oh, you should make a Shantae game in HD. And then they made that remake of the old NES DuckTales game. And, you know, people were like, oh, you should do a Shantae game on that engine. The thing was, the Shantae series sold like crap, and making one with those kinds of graphics would be way too expensive. So they did a Kickstarter, and they were like, hey, put your money where your mouth is. If you want to fund making these high-res, high-definition sprites, we'll make the game. And it hit at the perfect time, because all the different gaming news sites were posting information about the hot new Kickstarters that were coming out with Mighty No. 9 and stuff. And Shantae hits at almost the exact same time. And so they're like, hey, now we're going to do a Kickstarter for Shantae. What's Shantae? Oh, well, let me tell you the sob story about how it's this game that came out on Game Boy Color and received rave reviews but utterly tanked. And now it goes for hundreds of dollars on eBay. And, that's always like a flag. When there's this great game that tanked and goes for hundreds on eBay, and then the original team is getting back together to make a new one, well, that turns some heads. And a bunch of people who might not have even heard of Shantae, they're like, well, suddenly I'm interested in this. So, people started donating to the Kickstarter, and it wasn't the huge success that Mighty No. 9 was. We actually missed quite a few Kickstarter goals, actually. One of which is really awkwardly obvious, but we'll get to that in a minute. But people they started throwing money at it, and all of a sudden, people knew about this Shantae game. And, yeah, it started getting backed, it got some money, and, yeah, and people were talking about this, but very few people knew about Pirate's Curse. People did not know that Shantae and the Pirate's Curse was in development already. I remember when I backed it, I was like, wait, but you've already got one in development. So even if this tanks, we've got a new Shantae game on the horizon. Yes! So I backed it, and I raised my backer amount a couple of times, especially because the reason I donated so much was because we were only a few thousand short of the goal where they would release playable extra characters of Bolo, Sky, and Roddy Tops. And I want playable Roddy Tops since the first game, so I was like, all right, fine, you win. Take my money. And we made the goal. After the Kickstarter ended, they did a thing where you could still back it a little bit more. So we did make the goal.
Are you talking about Shantae and the Pirate's Curse?
I am talking about Shantae. I'm talking about the whole Shantae series.
I am Mose, and I love Shantae. Let's talk about this. I'm sorry I'm joining you now, because I heard you talk about one of my all-time favorite games ever.
Yes, I was recapping the history, because I'm one of the strange people who was actually a fan of Shantae 2 years before the first one came out.
Really?
Yeah, because I picked up Extreme Sports on Game Boy Color. Basically, I loved the art design of Extreme Sports. I found out it was an RPG, which was weird, and so I picked it up and I, Googled the artist's name. I Googled Matt Bozon, and he was talking with IGN about how he was trying to get Shantae released, because the game was done 2 years before it ever released.
Before WayForward put it out.
Well, WayForward, the WayForward company had been around. They're not a publisher, though. That was the problem.
So they developed it, but they didn't have any way to distribute it, is what you're saying.
Exactly. So they spent a year desperately trying to find a publisher, and then after they found a publisher, it was unfortunately Capcom, who at the time took a year to release anything, because I remember how long it took them to release their Dreamcast games. So by the time Shantae came out, sorry, this is a recap for all of you. By the time Shantae actually came out, the Game Boy Advance had been announced, released, and WayForward made their first game for it, which was
Game Boy Color. They came out for Game Boy Color originally.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Shantae is a Game Boy Color game,
but it was...
while they were waiting for Capcom to release the Game Boy Advance had been announced, released, and WayForward made their first game for it. So it took that long, and that was why Shantae tanked, was because it was a Game Boy Color game when the Game Boy Advance was the new hotness. In fact, that was why they called it back and put in the GBA Enhanced mode, because the first non-backlit Game Boy Advance had the really muddy colors for Game Boy Color games. They were like, we're going to brighten the colors if you put it in a GBA and throw in the Advanced dance. And then, yeah, as I was mentioning to them earlier, they immediately began work on Shantae Advance and could not get anyone to publish it. And when they did a stream of what they had done of the game with the Kickstarter for Half Genie Hero, and what they did with the stream, they talked about why it couldn't get released, and pretty much no American publisher would release a Game Boy Advance game that wasn't based on a TV series. That was why it couldn't get released. So, yeah, that happened. That was talked about, of course, Risky's Revenge, which was supposed to be like an episodic game, and then they just decided to cram it all into one episode, so we kind of got a third of a game. And then that brings us to Pirate's Curse, which, yeah, like I was saying, they did the Kickstarter for Half Genie Hero. Not a lot of people knew Pirate's Curse was already in development, so the Kickstarter winds up actually getting Shantae a bit of fame. People actually hear about it now. And so a year or so after the Kickstarter ends, Pirate's Curse comes out. People don't know that's not the game that was kickstarted, and they're like, oh, hey, that's that Shantae game that was kickstarted. I should give this a chance. And so people actually looked into it and bought it and gave it a chance. And on top of that, WayForward was smart this time. WayForward loves Nintendo, but almost to their detriment. This time, because everything had been on Nintendo platforms beforehand. It took them forever to port Risky's Revenge to other systems. This time, okay, it hit 3DS first, a month later it hits Wii U, then maybe a month or two later it hits PC, and then it hits Xbox One and PS4, and it's released on pretty much everything. Well, now there's a Shantae game everyone can play, and what a perfect time, because even with Half Genie Hero, I'm going to say Pirate's Curse is the best of the series.
You know, man, I haven't started Half Genie Hero yet. I actually went out and got the Risky Beats edition when it was brand new, but I was still working on Pirate's Curse. I'm just now finishing up, but it's been my favorite because it's got such a sense of humor about it, man.
Exactly, and that's part of why Pirate's Curse wound up being so nice, is it's the first one that gets to have writing. Because they, like I said, Matt and Aaron Bozon had been working on this series since like 1994, 1995. They had written so much about the games that just couldn't make it in there because there was no space for text on the Game Boy Color. And then they started having something going on with Risky's Revenge, but then the game had to be cut short, so they didn't really get to develop anything. Pirate's Curse is the first one where they really got to flesh out the characters, talk a little bit about their backstory, have a few actually dramatic and heartwarming moments, on top of course, its wacky sense of humor. And I was so happy to see that, and that's a large part of why Pirate's Curse is one of the best entries in the series. The other is just, it is the one that had the longest development cycle, because they get to recycle sprites from Risky's Revenge, and they started development on it pretty much immediately after Risky's Revenge. And so I don't know the exact timeline, but I want to say they got to take 5 years on that one. Of course, that's in between working on all of their licensed obligations, but still, they actually got to really flesh out the game before it was released, and yeah, it got popular because Pirate's Curse is really, really good, and it helped that they got that, like, alternate artist in there. Like, there's a funny story behind that. That artist actually works for Intercreates, and what happened was they just saw this guy's fan art for Shantae and was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Hey, we're going to hire you. You get to do the new portrait art. So that's what happened there, and hooray for that. And then, you know, a little bit after that, Half Genie Hero finally gets to wrap up and get released, and I'm so happy it came out. Even though I do think it's not as good as Pirate's Curse, I was really surprised by the fact that it was stage-based, which was a thing. I admit, I actually asked Matt Bozon years ago, hey, would you ever do a stage-based Shantae? And I kind of like that it's stage-based because that does mean it gets to have some more active and interesting stage design. But at the same time, it's like, this probably wasn't the best one to do that on since the assets were so expensive. You should have stuck with the Metroidvania style just so you could sap the most out of that. And, let's see, but my biggest beef with it, my number one complaint with Half Genie Hero would have to be the backtracking in it. Because it's stage-based, but they still want you to backtrack and go to areas with new powers to unlock more things. And later on, once I really started getting into the grooves and just chillaxing with the game, it didn't bother me at all, and I enjoyed it. But when I first played it, I was like, oh, wow, new Shantae's here. I want to see all the new stages. I want to hear all the new music. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And so, you know, I played through the first stage, yay. Played through the second stage, yay. And then it's like, oh, hey, you have to go back to the first stage. Okay, and do a little bit at the second stage. Okay, now I get to go to the third stage. Yeah, do the third stage, and then, okay, now I gotta go back to the first and second and third stage again. Now the fourth stage, it's like, okay, this is a little annoying, and I dropped it for a bit, but now that I'm prepared for that, I've been enjoying it much more. I'm ready to go to the final dungeon, but I'm gonna be backtracking to be sure I get all the items for the good ending. And now I'm really excited to go home and finally finish that off, even though I really wanted to wait for the blue costume to finally come out. I don't know when that is. But since that's my backer reward costume, it's like, I kind of want to finish the game with that, but at the same time, I kind of want to finish the game. And yeah, the reason I'm talking about this again is because tomorrow Half Genie Hero hits the Switch.
Oh.
Yeah, because...
I didn't realize... Cool.
Yeah, because it was an obvious thing to do. It's probably not a hard port. They are putting in some, what do they call that, HD Rumble features with the game. But I think HD Rumble is kind of dumb. But they are putting in some HD Rumble features with the game. But yeah, it's an obvious and easy port. And of course, these people love the Switch. The only question, and this is such a good question a friend of mine brought up, where's the Mighty Switch Force for the Switch? Was that too obvious to do? But yeah, so they prioritize getting Shantae on the Switch. And of course, now people know what Shantae is. Now it's actually kind of popular and people talk about it. And apparently it's going to be getting a figurine, a Charagumin figurine from some Japanese company. So I'm excited to see that. Also,
you're familiar with Indivisible?
I am familiar with Indivisible. And yes, I know Shantae is going to be in that.
That's going to be cool, man.
That will be. I have a little bit of I'm a little iffy on Indivisible for personal reasons, but for the most part...
Have you played the demo?
I have not.
I have.
I know.
It is like nothing I've seen in an RPG, man.
Well, then you need to play Valkyrie Profile.
Oh.
Because that's the point. Indivisible is them basically making their own Valkyrie Profile. They openly admit it's 100% inspired by Valkyrie Profile. The problem was... The original Valkyrie Profile, great game on PS1, had this super fun style where you are platforming through the dungeons, and then you get into a fight, and you've got each character assigned to a different face button. It was super fun and kind of arcadey, but then, like, the sequels to it took it in all these weird directions. Like, the second game is really good, but it's just not the first one. It lacks the arcadey feel. And same thing with the DS one, which was a strategy game that still had elements of that, but, it just wasn't the same. So that's why Indivisible from, what was it, Lab Zero.
Yeah, same guys that did Skullgirls.
Yeah, that's why the Skullgirls team was like, wow, this was a really fun game, but it went in a direction we didn't really like, and we haven't seen anything out of Valkyrie Profile since the PS2, so hey, we'll make our own Valkyrie Profile. So I respect that, and I'm sure the gameplay is great. I have just certain beef with it, which I don't want to get into.
All right.
But, so that... I am happy that Shantae is in that, and she, of course, also got added into that Runbow game.
I didn't know about this. What?
Yeah, Runbow is it's like an even more simplified but more players Smash Brothers-y type of game, and with one of the releases, that's right, it coincided with the 3DS release of the game. They added Shantae to it. I think they ported it to a few other systems as well.
I'm going to have to check this out. Thank you for letting me know about that.
Oh, not a problem. Yeah, Shantae almost reached Shovel Knight status of being added to every indie game. Because that's a thing. Beware of random Shovel Knight. Oh, thank you so much for joining me out of nowhere.
Thanks, man. I heard you. I was out in the lobby. I heard you talk about Shantae, and I was like, oh, man. I love Shantae, so I had to jump in here and just join you real quick.
Not a problem.
Thanks, man.
That is a pretty good recap of what happened with the Shantae series, which now people know about and enjoy, like him, like Mose. And, so I think I'm going to kick y'all back to the music, and then when we get back, I'm going to talk about a peculiarity in a Penny Arcade comic recently about Star Trek Bridge Crew. Namely about how the random players of it just seem inexplicably more polite. And I've actually been percolating that in my brain. And I wanna touch back on that. So, we are going to kick you to back to the music with I Want It by Blue October. And then, after a short break, we will come back and discuss that as we wrap up today's episode of GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Now, here's I Want It by Blue October. Thank you for listening. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell. This is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Before the break, we talked a whole lot about the history of the Shantae franchise and its many struggles because of course, Shantae Half Genie Hero getting a Nintendo Switch release tomorrow. That's just going to be the digital one. We don't know if they're actually going to get a physical one for it or not. That might be later on down the road. I mentioned that I do think Pirate's Curse is actually better than Half Genie Hero. I'm really impressed by Pirate's Curse. But Half Genie Hero is good, but, the backtracking in it is kind of annoying. And the fact that it was stage-based caught me off guard. The one thing I forgot to mention with the Kickstarter thing is the part that is such an obvious missing Kickstarter level. I don't know what this game would have been like if they only reached the minimum goal, because they only had, 3 or 4 stages planned, and the rest were added thanks to Kickstarter stuff. But, one of them, the very next goal that we didn't make was the Nega Shantae level. And the character still shows up in the game, but in a really, really brief cutscene where it's hey, there should probably be a level in here. It almost feels out of place when that scene actually hits that there's not a level there. But whatever. We takes what we can get. Because the rest of the game is very nice and fleshed out and good. I am still very much loving it. But let's oh yeah, that's right. One more thing I want to mention. We were talking about how Shantae has been showing up in a couple of indie games. I mentioned Runbow, which apparently got a PC release, so it's Wii U, new 3DS, not regular 3DS, and PC for that one. And apparently they piled on the indie game characters for that. But another game that has Shantae in it, kinda, sorta, Xbox One game that's a free download called #IDARB, which stands for It Draws a Red Box. It was a weird indie game that was, like, crowd-designed. The idea was they started with just a red box, and then they just, like, tweeted IDARB and wanted people to give suggestions for what they should do with the game next. And the result is this weird sort of pongity sports game that has, like, a very basic, you can draw the sprites character customization system. And one of the default teams is the Way Forward team. So it has Shantae, Roddy Tops, Risky Boots, Sky, I think Bolo on it. And it also has Guppy and I think Finn. Because that's the part that I remember. It has Guppy from Extreme Sports, and that's what really matters. I forget if Syme made it in there or not. But, probably not. But, yeah, one of the default teams is, like, Team Way Forward, and that's a free download on Xbox One. So if you happen to actually have one of those, hey, that's floating around out there. It's a very basic little indie sports game with online play and things. But it was adorable, and I like the fact that there was a Way Forward team in there. But, moving along, I actually want to talk about something that was worth pondering in the recent Penny Arcade comic. Penny Arcade, of course, long-running video game comic series. And the recent one, they showed what random players are like in other games. They're showing Overwatch with people just swearing up a storm. One guy saying, I can't decide which race I hate the most. And then, like, they show what randoms are like in Star Trek Bridge Crew. And, like, they're being super polite and completely role-playing. And, okay, my first Star Trek Bridge Crew mission certainly had some interesting people in it, but they meant it all in good faith, and since then they've certainly, like, mellowed out because I've continued to play with them because they were fun. But, yeah, in general, Star Trek Bridge Crew has had some very, very chill players. And it's one of those things where you wonder about that. And I was, like, trying to figure out why is it that the randoms in this are like that, and there's a couple of reasons. Number one is the fact that it's Star Trek Bridge Crew. Just the very nature of the game lets you know this isn't going to be something that you're going to want. How do I put it? No, it's going to be kind of boring if you want fast action. This is a game about 4 people working together to fly a starship. Now, that opens up all sorts of trolling possibilities, but you're just going to piss people off when you try to troll on Star Trek Bridge Crew. Like, you're just going to make people very, very angry, and I'm not sure if you can kick people from games, but if you can, you will be, because, yeah, like, everyone needs to work together. If one person isn't doing their job, everyone loses. And so the trolling opportunities are there, but it would just be kind of, it would just be pissing people off, and I think it would lose its appeal very quickly because, like, you can't really do anything other than that then. If you just become well known for trolling people in Star Trek Bridge Crew, guess what? You have made a game where the entire purpose is for people to yell at you for being an idiot. Like, you can't really do anything without teamwork and cooperation. But the second part is sort of the nature of Star Trek Bridge Crew, because I was thinking about why is it so enjoyable in spite of the fact that it's a kind of boring game at the same time. I mean, all I'm doing is adjusting how much power goes to each system and sending out repair crews. Why am I enjoying this so much? And I think a lot of that is the role-playing that you're going to do whether you like it or not. Whether you know anything about Star Trek, whether you normally role-play or not, guess what? You're going to role-play in this game. Because you have to. You literally have to. And it's one of those things I just didn't think about VR. But yeah, when you put on that headset, your world is replaced with a digital recreation of the world of Star Trek. And your body is that of a crew member. You look down and you see your arms and legs and body, and you're in a Starfleet uniform. You are a Starfleet officer. Period. And when you get into a multiplayer match, you see everyone else as Starfleet officers, as they puppeteer their digital characters. And then you get in a ship, and you're playing your role on a bridge crew. When you think about it, in video games, you're always technically playing some kind of role. You're playing Super Mario Brothers, you're playing the role of Mario. But, it's in third person, it's side-scrolling, you're detached from that character. But in bridge crew, I mean, you literally are that person. That's what your arms and legs are inside of there. And, you're just playing a random crew member that you can loosely customize. You just are you, and you're a member of the bridge crew. And on top of that, well, the whole game is about working together and communicating with the other players. You can't go into warp unless unless the engineer charges the warp coils, and then you have a limited amount of time to go to engage the warp drive. So that means that neither the captain, the helm, nor the engineer can cause the ship to go into warp without one another. I think you can kind of leave the captain out. But you can't go into warp without communication between the helm and the engineer. They have to say, requesting permission to warp. They have to say, someone even if you don't say it, full RP, requesting permission to warp, sir. And you just say, will someone please charge the friggin' warp coils? Someone needs to know they need to hit the charge warp coils button. And as such, you need to tell someone to charge the warp coils, and in that way, you're sort of tricked into role-playing. And it's interesting. And then, whoever's the engineer has to tell you, warp coils are charging. Whether they say, charging warp coils, or they just say, warp coils are doing the thing. You're still, in a way, role-playing. And it's I just never thought about that. This is a game that is built entirely around pretending to be members of Starfleet, pretending to be Starfleet officers. And you have to play along, or you're not playing the game. I was would that apply to other VR titles? Because, is this what a VR RPG would be like? And the answer I came up with was no. Because I thought about the nature of RPGs, and you're going to be spending a lot of time discussing your loot and what buffs your weapon has and what stats you have. Ironically, RPGs would be the worst for role-playing. But in Star Trek Bridge Crew, you don't level up, you don't have skills, you are, the whole thing is fly this ship, complete this mission. So that's all you really have to talk about, in terms of game communication, is doing the mission and flying the ship. And so you kind of get into the role. It's just very interesting, just thinking about that. And it's it's hard to be that much of a jerk when you're forced into doing this and everyone else is being so sincere. I think you kind of start to feel bad about it. There's degrees of jerkiness you can get away with, but a lot of it winds up actually working in universe. I don't want this to be a challenge though, because yes, there's plenty of ways you could troll people, and then you realize that you just spent full price for a game where everyone hates you because you just screw up everyone's missions. So yeah, that is my best analysis of why things play out the way they do in that Penny Arcade comic. And if you want to see some of the game in action, I did upload a stream to my YouTube channel, which is, of course, youtube.com/user/GameBabble show. You'll see one saying, Gel Trek Episode 1. I set everything up, actually made, a proper overlay for it. The, audio-visual sync for the picture-in-picture is a little bit off, but in general, it works just fine, and you can see some Star Trek Bridge Crew in action with me playing with the one guy. Ooh, I finally sat down and flew the original Enterprise. I haven't done this online. I've only played offline on the original Enterprise, but that thing is a trip. Remember how I was complaining about the touchscreen movement? how you steer the ship with a touchscreen on the USS Aegis. Okay, on the original Enterprise, you use unlabeled arrow keys. I was really hoping for a joystick, but nope, there is no joystick on the bridge of the original Enterprise. So you fly with unlabeled arrow keys. The original Enterprise is amazingly convoluted, and it is such a trip because of the view screen. Because you see, on the Aegis, you actually have like a window, and you look outside and you see space in 3D. On the original Enterprise, you don't get a window, you get a view screen. It's flat. And of course you hear that and you go, well, yeah, of course it's flat. That's the way it would be. But you don't, like, the effect is so just surreal. Because I'm used to being on the Aegis, I'm used to this feeling of spaciousness that really feels like the bridge of a starship. You play on the original Enterprise, and it feels like a cheap TV set. Like, the view screen is so much smaller, and it's completely flat, and just the nature of the flatness of that screen is just so weird to me. And yeah, all the controls are convoluted. There's a button you can press to give them labels, but everything on the original Enterprise is a convoluted mess. Oh, but the best part was when I was losing the mission, and this is in the video, you can watch it. I did not expect this to happen. One of the consoles blew up, and a red shirt spins around and flings himself over the banister and rolls on the ground. It's amazing. And for the record, when you're playing original Enterprise, I'm pretty certain you're in the original Star Trek universe, and I say this entirely because the Klingons we were fighting were way too hammy to be anything else. Just the ham was real. So yeah, hopefully, I'm making no guarantees about when I'm going to do it, but I'm hoping maybe tonight I will get back to streaming Star Trek Bridge Crew, this time in the green, because I've heard a rumor on the PlayStation VR message board that if you get a green floodlight, so that way your whole room is just painted green, that it drastically improves the tracking, and a bunch of people have reported this. So I went out, I bought a floodlight. I have not yet tested this out. I have it hooked up, have everything ready. The green is actually very soothing. So, hopefully tonight, I make no guarantees. I am going to try to stream another go at Star Trek Bridge Crew, this time in an entirely green room. I'm going to use the green floodlight, and we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I do believe it is time to wrap up GameBabble Live. Remember, next week is E3. So, egad, I am just going to be talking nonstop, aren't I? Because next week is E3. So yeah, be excited for E3, and not too much to recap. I mean, next week though, next Monday is Black Butler, 7 p.m. at the Tivoli, and Ronnie's. At the Tivoli and Ronnie's, 7 p.m. will be Black Butler on Monday, and then on Wednesday, Monday is sub, Wednesday is dubbed, and then I mentioned that My Neighbor Totoro will be later on in the month. Well, I think that was like 25th and 26th. But yeah, so we got that, and yeah, Tekken 7 came out. It's neat, sparse on content. Not too terrible, and yeah, Pokken Tournament is coming to the Switch. Yeah, that about sums it up, so thank you very, very much for listening to GameBabble Live here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. And remember, I will be back next week with even more GameBabble Live as E3 smacks us in the face. Until then, though, time to kick you back to the music. So, please enjoy Trip Switch by Nothing But Thieves here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Once again, thank you for listening.